Today's joint practice against the Los Angeles Rams might be the most impactful proving ground for the New Orleans Saints quarterback competition. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're previewing today's joint practice between the Saints and the Rams. We'll take a look at Kellen Moore's offense compared to Sean McVay's offense, why that should be a lot of fun, and the defenses that end up complementing that fun competition as well. We'll take a look at the New Orleans Saints offensive line, which is sure to get a bit of a workout going up against that pass rush from the Los Angeles Rams. And we're going to kick everything off with why this is probably going to be the most important proving ground for Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shough in the team's quarterback competition. We got all that coming up for you on today's show. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being it every day. Or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yeah, look, I think this could be the most important day for the New Orleans Saints quarterbacks when it comes to this quarterback competition. Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shough, both have shown good things. Both have shown some things I'm sure that they would like back. But really, it's the adversity and managing the adversity that's most important. And they're sure to see adversity and also have an opportunity to bounce back from adversity over the course of this one-day joint practice with the Los Angeles Rams. So let's break it down for each of these quarterbacks. We'll start off with Spencer Rattler, who I think is still in the lead when it comes to quarterback competition and certainly would like to expand that lead quite a bit across against Tyler Shough, because he'll have to in order to earn that week one role. I think the biggest thing for him is going to be bouncing back from not really the last 2 days, because again, on Wednesday, he had a strong day, completed 15 of his 20 passes, threw a pair of touchdowns, including one that went for like a lateral touchdown and all those other things that would count as a touchdown. But each of the end of the last two practices, he's led this long double-digit play drive, and then in situations that aren't really within his control, ended up with interceptions by the end of it, which isn't to say that he had bad practices. Like I said, strong practices in both of those showings, especially the one on Wednesday, but not necessarily the punctuation that you'd like to have, which isn't the same as having a punctuation you don't want to have, but not getting the punctuation that you'd like to have on each of those last 2 days. Today gives Spencer Rattler an opportunity to be able to punctuate as much as he wants when it comes to, or as much as he can, when it comes to what should be a pivotal day in this quarterback competition. The interception that ended his day by Julian Blackmon on Wednesday was on a throw it up situation with 2 seconds left on the clock on a third down by a touchdown scenario. So you just put the ball up in the end zone, hope somebody goes out there and makes a play on it, hope it's not a defensive guy. Unfortunately, it was a defensive guy, not on Spencer Rattler. Then you go to the day before that on Tuesday, a very well-placed pass to Dante Pettis. Ball goes off the hands of Dante Pettis, tips up in the air, and then Julian Blackmon ends up with it. So 2 straight days, you saw double-digit play drives into the red zone that end up landing on, not so advantageous situations into the defense's hands. And so now you get a chance, if you're Spencer Rattler, to kind of show up and punctuate, because there's no reason he should lose confidence after those 2 interceptions. But I wouldn't blame him if he was a little annoyed. You know what I mean? Like walking into this Rams practice going, I really didn't want my day to end that way. And due to the circumstances, it did. Now I'm going to make sure that this day doesn't even have a chance to end that way. And so I look to see if he will be able to kind of take the reins and kind of own the day, seize the day, if you will, in that situation. Over on the Tyler Shough side of it all, it's really just about continuing the momentum. He's had really good momentum since the Saints switched over to a little bit more scrimmage, live call type situations. And he had a pretty strong day in the preseason game as well, minus the welcome to the NFL pick 6. If I'm not holding any of those interceptions against those guys, then you see strong days from all of them and an opportunity to bounce back and do so with 2 key factors. Going up against a pretty good defense that's going to bring you a pretty good pass rush. That's number 1. But also number 2, actually getting opportunities with the first team offense. This was something that I talked about in yesterday's live show that I want to go back to real quick in case you didn't catch that show. And even if you did catch it, I think it's worth being reminded of going into whatever reporting is going to come out of this joint practice today, that the things that you hear coming out of these joint practice should end up holding and carrying some weight. And we'll tell you if it doesn't, but should end up holding some weight. And this is coming from a guy that really, honestly, I'm not a big fan of joint practices, period. I don't think that teams actually get out of it what they say that they got out of it. I don't buy it. I think that there's things that you can do within your own organization that allow you to be able to control the situation a bit more. Joint practice, to me, is just a risk. But when you have a quarterback competition, it gives you a lot of added value. When you have new players on the offensive line, there's a lot of value. When you have new coaching, there's a lot of value. That's why we're focusing on all that on today's show. But this opportunity for Spencer Rattler, for Tyler Shough, for the both of them, is one that is unique. When you go in and you're the starter in a preseason game and you're playing with other first team players, you're not always playing with other starters. No Chris Olave, no Alvin Kamara, no Rashid Shaheed to start that game against the Chargers. Best believe that if Tyler Shough is starting the game Sunday against Jacksonville, he ain't getting those guys either. You know what I mean? And if he does, it's for a very, very brief amount of time. And so these joint practices give both of these guys a little bit more of a fair shot to actually have a first team around them, have the starters around them. Kellen Moore said that the workload is going to be pretty heavy for the first team guys. That's why I don't expect a lot of those first team guys to see snaps, or at least not many snaps, going into Sunday's game against Jacksonville with that preseason game, which stinks for fans, right? Because you don't get to come and see anything during the Rams and Saints joint practice. The Rams are hosting this joint practice. Their practices are closed, and so therefore this is closed as well. And if the Saints were hosting these Irvine, California practices, they have been closed. And so because of that, they would have also been closed to the public. So you kind of lose your chance as a fan to get an early look at the starting lineup. But this is going to be really valuable for these two quarterbacks, that they actually get to take snaps with the guys that they're expected to take snaps with week 1 of the 2025 season, which Spencer Rattler in live game situations has not done yet, right? Tyler Shough coming in as a rookie has not done yet. And so being able to do this and go into these joint practices, go up against another team, a good team at that, probably one of my favorites in terms of like Super Bowl favorites or playoff favorites, probably one of the favorites going into the 2025 season in the NFC. And so now you get a chance to go up against those guys with the other players that you're actually going to take snaps with in 2025. So this is a major opportunity for both of these quarterbacks to show what it is that they could do with a full complement in a way that they haven't been able to do that. Now, it's a full-ish complement, right? They won't have Trevor Penning, but they're going to have the starting wide receivers. They're going to have Juwan Johnson, their top tight end, along with Jack Stoll. They're going to have the majority of their starting offensive line. They're going to have Alvin Kamara. All of that makes a big difference. And so I'm really, really intrigued to see how these two quarterbacks handle that situation, having all the weapons and going up against a unfamiliar competition, while also being in what has become a very familiar and friendly competition between Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shough. I think today could be the most important day, could wind up being the most important day in this quarterback battle by the time that it's all said and done. Coming up next, this is also going to be a very important day for the offensive line, who is sure to be tested. We'll get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Me and some of the other Locked On folks are going to be playing Yahoo Fantasy football this year, and you should be too. Whether you're a first-timer or you're a veteran that's starting up your millionth league, you can get everything that you need over at Yahoo Fantasy, along with some fantastic new opportunities and modes and things like that they're going to be releasing new features all throughout the month of August. For instance, to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over the 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play Yahoo Fantasy football, where the lowest scoring team each week gets knocked off until there's one team left standing. And so with the season right around the corner, it's a great time to get your league together and try out this new mode. And if you're into the classics, you can still play head-to-head in a public league or join private leagues as well. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints offensive line, a little banged up and sure to be tested here up against the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams have a really good defensive line that should help to be able to kind of push a little bit of the development for this New Orleans Saints offensive line as they try to mesh and mold together with their new sort of set of circumstances. Kelvin Banks, the rookie, starting over at left tackle. Taliesin Fuanga moving back to his natural, or not natural, but collegiate position of right tackle. And then now you have Dylan Radins playing left guard while Trevor Penning is out nursing a toe injury. And of course, Eric McCoy at center, along with Cesar Ruiz at right guard. This is going to be quite the test for this offensive line in front of their young rookie, or young, not rookie, but also young rookie and young second year quarterbacks, right? They're young quarterbacks that are going to be there behind and under center. And I think that this is going to be a big prove it moment for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to their offensive line. If this offensive line goes in there and struggles against these guys, both in the run game as well as in the pass rush game, even though we are still looking at some, mostly non-contact thud type of situations, we're not going to watch these two teams go live. They're not going to go into, full wrap up tackling or anything like that. But going into kind of thud mode and still having pads on, still having padded practices here, you're still going to see some physicality. You're still going to see some determination, and you're still going to see some offensive line, defensive line trench play in the midst of all this. And I think that this is going to be a good exercise and measuring stick, barometer, if you will, for this New Orleans Saints offensive line. And two key reasons why are Byron Young and Jared Verse going up against these two speedy, athletic, really, really good pass rushers. Byron Young finished last season with 7.5 sacks. Nick Verse. It's Nick Kroll all over again. Jared Verse with 4.5 sacks. And I think that this is going to be really good for guys like Kelvin Banks Jr. as well as Taliesin Fuanga. And look, they're going to get their opportunity to go up against both of these guys. We have some numbers here from our friends over at True Media. The right outside linebacker spot is where Jared Verse spends the majority of his time rushing, going back to his rookie season last year with 462 defensive snaps, not just pass rush snaps, but defensive snaps coming from there. That right outside linebacker lines up over the left tackle. So that would be a lot of matchups with Kelvin Banks Jr. But he also spent 216 snaps last year lined up at left outside linebacker. So expect Taliesin Fuanga to get an opportunity to see a little bit of Jared Verse during the day as well. Looking over at Byron Young, we see the similar but different trend flipped the opposite way. Left outside linebacker, he spent 517 of his defensive snaps there. That places him over Taliesin Fuanga at right tackle quite a bit. But again, over 222 snaps over on the opposite side at right outside linebacker. So it's likely that Kelvin Banks Jr. will get to meet Byron Young as well. So both of those guys will get their opportunities to go up against, both of those guys being Kelvin Banks Jr. as well as Taliesin Fuanga, going up against guys that combined for 12.5 sacks last season. That's not how math works. 5 plus 7. Yeah, 12 sacks over the, I was close. I wasn't that bad. 12 sacks just last year. And those are guys that were just playing across from one another for the first time. Jared Verse coming in as a rookie last year. And so I think that you're going to see a lot of opportunities for both of these players to be able to go out there. At right outside linebacker, where Jared Verse took most of his snaps last year, he had 39 pressures. At left outside linebacker, where Byron Young took most of his snaps last year, he had 29 pressures. So both of those guys very productive from their strong sides, we'll call them, in terms of what it is that they were able to get done. But both of them also double-digit pressures coming from their opposite sides as well. So both just as effective and are going to be able to give both of these tackles, Banks and Fuanga, a real opportunity to be able to continue to develop and, again, see some new competition, right? You're going up against Chase Young and Carl Granderson, which is already pretty good. But then now, two guys that were top 20 in pressures last year, now you get your chance to go up against Byron Young and Jared Verse. Specifically, Jared Verse, really, really excellent opportunity for them. But it doesn't stop there. The interior of the offensive line gets a big-time challenge as well, thanks to Braden Fisk. And this is a guy that a lot of people liked coming out of Florida State in the draft. And the Rams end up with him, and he gets 8.5 sacks from the interior during his rookie season last year. Interior for the Rams, again, being a 3-4 kind of alignment, an odd front alignment, we'll call it. So they use 3 down linemen and then 2 of those outside linebackers to rush the passer. It's the same thing that the Saints are doing with Brandon Staley, or a similar look to what the Saints are doing with Brandon Staley this year. 3 down linemen and then 2 stand-up edge rushers over on the sides. Braden Fisk, though, really good pass rusher coming from there. So he's kind of the Brian Brzee of the Rams, if you want to think about it that way. Brian Brzee, of course, 7.5 sacks last year. Braden Fisk, 8.5. And so both these guys are really impactful interior pass rushers. The difference being that last year, Brian Brzee with the Saints had to do it from a 3-tech spot, right, as a defensive tackle. Now he's going to get the opportunity to kind of mimic what it is that Braden Fisk gets to do, which is be a 3-4 defensive end, kind of lining up as like a 4 or 5 tech in that way, and be able to rush the passer from those situations, kind of one-on-one with the guard. Pretty good situation for them. But for New Orleans, that's going to bring really good tests to guys like Cesar Ruiz, as well as Dylan Radins, who's trying to fit in at his new position at left guard. So for the Saints. And so that's going to be, both of those guys should get some really, really good opportunities to kind of grow, develop, go up against some premier competition, all of that here throughout this joint practice up against the Rams. And so it's a good exposure opportunity for both of them, but it's also, or for the entire offensive line, but it's also because they're going up against pretty good competition. And I think that, speaking with some folks that, like joint practices, that don't like joint practices, things like that, like one of the things that you always hear people talk about is you have to make sure you're going up against somebody that challenges you, right? You can't go up against somebody that does the same things that you do. Then there's no point, right? You should have just continued doing your practices. This is one of the reasons why I don't like joint practices for the most part, because a lot of times teams just end up practicing against teams that kind of do the same thing that they already do. That's why I thought last year when the Saints were going to do their joint practice up against San Francisco, I was like, why? Because you had Clint Kubiak coming over from San Francisco, bringing the San Francisco offense to you, and then you're going to go and practice against San Francisco. It didn't make a ton of sense. And so when San Francisco withdrew from their joint practices because they were very banged up and very injured, as they unfortunately so often are for them, it was like, oh, actually kind of good, because it was like the Saints were already dealing with so many injuries last year in training camp. Like, I know that it feels like the Saints are really, really injured right now, but it's nothing like it was last year, where we were literally reporting a new injury almost every single practice for like the first 14 or 15 days. It was insane. And then you were going to go into joint practices to practice against an offense that you're already running. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense. And so for me, like this is a situation where it can make sense. It makes sense for the quarterbacks with the quarterback competition. It makes sense going up against that defense. It makes sense going up against Sean McVay's offense, all of that. And speaking of Sean McVay's offense, one of the things that's going to be so interesting to watch is being able to see Sean McVay's offense go on the field. And then when he goes off the field, Kellen Moore's offense goes on the field. And I'm really interested to kind of see the barometer and the way that those two potentially compete with each other from the offensive sides of the football. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. It's like having a little CFO you carry around in your pocket. It doesn't get any better than Monarch Money, who's helping you manage your finances and beyond that, build your wealth as well. We all wish that managing all of our financial accounts, making sure that we understand, what they're worth, and, whether your 401ks, properties, or investments are hitting the way that you want them to, and needing to keep all of that in one place can sometimes be really, really challenging, right? We all want it to be simpler. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, because they absolutely help to do that. And you have their fantastic, easy to use interface on your laptop or on your phone. I ended up linking a bunch of my accounts to Monarch Money, helped me immediately spot some of the subscriptions that I didn't want anymore, where I was spending too much money, helped me eliminate some apps from my phone as well. So look, don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Maybe one of the most underrated parts of today's joint practice is going to be sort of the comparison that we'll be able to see between Kellen Moore's offense and Sean McVay's offense. Now, listen, there's some caveats to this, right? Sean McVay has been installing and running his offense with the Rams for many, many, many years now. Kellen Moore is a first-time head coach and his first time installing an offense with the New Orleans Saints. So we have to caveat with that. But I do think that this gives Kellen Moore an opportunity to kind of stand face to face with a giant in the NFL on the offensive side and say, hey, whatever you can do, I can do better, right? And to be able to get into a practice where you're going to be able to see Sean McVay's offense go after his old friend, Brandon Staley's defense, and then to see sort of the disciple of all of these years so far of multiple Rams defensive coordinators, Chris Shough, be able to kind of run his 3-4 defensive look going up against Kellen Moore. This should be a lot of fun. And don't forget that these two teams meet like week 9 or whatever of the NFL season. So they'll be going at it again later on this year. But instead of the McVay-Staley immediate competition, which we are going to discuss here in just a sec, I do think is really interesting. What I'm so intrigued by is going to be McVay's offense and then comparing it a little bit to Kellen Moore's offense. Now, it doesn't mean that if Kellen Moore's offense is less successful against Shough and the Los Angeles Rams defense, then McVay's offense is effective against Brandon Staley and the Saints defense, that Kellen Moore is doing anything wrong. But what's more intriguing is if he can have an offense that goes toe-to-toe with that Rams defense in the same way that McVay's offense is sure to go toe-to-toe with the Saints defense. And so that's what I'm most interested in seeing. And it doesn't necessarily come down to, does this team score points and does that team score points? Because you got to factor in the quarterback difference and all those other things. Although I'm not expecting that we're going to see Matthew Stafford in action for the Rams here as they work to get him back out on the football field. But what we do get to see is how creative Sean McVay's offense looks in a practice versus how creative Kellen Moore's offense looks in a practice. We get to see the innovations, the uses of motion by Sean McVay. And then we get to compare that to the innovations and the uses of motion of Kellen Moore the very next drive. The Saints were among the number 5 teams, like the top 5 teams in the NFL in terms of running motion in the preseason. And this is a vanilla version or a more standard version, more fundamental version of the offense that Kellen Moore will deploy in 2025, which goes to show you just how fundamental motion is going to be to his offense. He's not an overly, motion crazy guy like a Mike McDaniel over in Miami or a Kyle Shanahan over in San Francisco, but he does utilize it and he does find ways to get it involved in his offense, give the quarterback a little bit of extra information by using it, all those other things, motions, shifts, all that. Everything about that ends up becoming a part of what it is that Kellen Moore does. So now getting to see how Sean McVay will use it in practice and being able to immediately compare that to Kellen Moore is going to be a lot of fun. And then also the inclusions of things like play action, RPO usage, all of that. The Saints didn't show a bunch of their RPO. I think they only ran about 5% of their offensive plays were RPOs during the preseason, but they were top 5, tied for 5th in play action usage in terms of total plays utilized. So I think that's another place where you're going to get an opportunity to be able to see, okay, what are some of the other easy buttons that Sean McVay implements in his offense, and how does Kellen Moore implement those in his offense? When we talk about easy buttons, we typically talk about like motion and RPOs and play action, things that make the life of the quarterback a little bit quote unquote easier, right? Because you can never make the life of a quarterback easy. There's no doing that. But can you make it a little bit easier by utilizing some of these additional pieces that give them a chance to freeze a linebacker with play action, or an extra chance to diagnose what the defense is doing because of motion, or a chance to be able to make a decision post-snap based on what the defense is doing by utilizing the RPO, right? I see where this defensive end is and where the pressure is. I'm going to actually keep this and throw it. Or I see that the defense is out of position, so I'm going to hand this off, right? So those things are giving the quarterback more information to be able to process and then utilize to try to make the right decision with the football. Those are easy buttons, but it's not making the job of the quarterback easy by any stretch of the imagination. But we'll kind of get to see a little bit of the one-to-one comparison when it comes to one of the best in the NFL as an offensive play calling head coach in Sean McVay going up against one of the best in the NFL play callers in Kellen Moore, who is now going into his first year as a head coach. Can he maintain that play calling prowess in the league? I loved the conversation between Demario Davis and Kay Adams over on her show, our friends over at FanDuel and FanDuel TV, Up and Adams. And he was talking a little bit about, I'm probably going to date myself a little bit when I say this because nothing ages faster than video game lingo. But he kind of talked about how like in the gaming community playing Madden, there are those people that just kind of know. And what he was describing was the meta, right? Knowing the meta, how this play works and when to use this and how, this play is a man beater and all this stuff. Or if you pick this play and then audible this route, then all of a sudden it's kind of an unstoppable play, blah, blah, blah. And so you're knowing the cheese, right? So it's about using those cheese plays. And so apparently he looks at Kellen Moore as a guy that knows the meta, right? That knows the glitches, that knows the cheese and how to utilize it. We'll get our opportunity to see that up against Sean McVay, who's already proven to be one of those guys in the NFL. And then Brandon Staley gets to go up against another, like for a second time in the same week, gets to go up against another former team of his and former cohort of his in a way that should be a lot of fun. The defenses are pretty similar. Brandon Staley's and Shough's, those are going to be pretty similar. So you're seeing a little bit of carbon copiness there in terms of, again, how valuable are these really? But with the quarterback battle, it makes a lot of sense for New Orleans. And for the defenders over on the Saints side, even though they're running a similar system to what the Rams are, it's a lot of these players first time in the league running in this kind of system. So it gives them a chance to be able to utilize that. So we're looking forward to all of that and much more over here on this joint practice. We'll be live later on with the 9 p.m. squad show. Make sure you come through for that as we recap it, and I'll have you covered in the morning as well. And of course, don't forget to check us out at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. every Monday through Friday on the Golf Course Sports and Entertainment Network. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you find me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.